is the courage to stay with that broken heart and to ask, what can I do? And to be open to trying to see what the next step is for us to do. In the statement, I put it in a question form. We have Avalokiteshvara is all-sided. He, she sees every conflict from both sides, and her compassion flows into the world like sunshine on the planet. The sunshine doesn't decide to only shine on certain countries and not shine on other countries. That capacity is already in us as human beings. It's in every human being, but it gets covered up, clouds as it were, clouds of opinions, clouds of a narrative, clouds of thinking, clouds of understanding. My teachers at Master Sung Song would always say, understanding cannot help you. And if you argued with him, he would say, oh, just look at the world. The world has plenty of understanding. There's understanding at every level of society. There's understanding at every level of power structures in our society. And yet we still have the enormous amount of suffering and conflict that we have. So then I was encouraged, okay, if understanding doesn't help me, what does help me, sir? I asked. And his answer was, only don't know. So what does that look like in real life? Only don't know means having a question. Just what is this? Or how is this? And we put the question at the pain point. So I can't speak for the rest of you, but as I live in this world, I feel pain. And I've learned, put the question at that pain point. What is this? What is this? And I'll see that I'm holding an opinion about one side or the other. I'm holding a feeling about how much suffering is going on. I'll make this attempt to analyze the causes and the results, My thinking mind immediately goes to, what is the cause of this? What is the root of this? How can this be untangled? That is a fruitless exercise. The causes and results of the events in our world are not illuminating. They cannot be understood. Understanding won't help us. Every time we think we see a cause and a result, we see a relationship. Oh, it started here, and then this led to this, and then this led to this. That's only looking at the surface. And when we do that, we are attaching to, this led to this led to that led to this. And once we're attached, all we can do is follow that train. If we can let go of our idea, let go of our view, let go of our analysis, and just keep this question, what is this? What is the truth? Then our mind becomes clear and our heart can become clear. We can see the truth more clearly when we let go of our opinion, of our story, let go of our feeling. Now, to do this, we have to also be very gentle with ourselves. We can't judge a feeling that we're having. We can't judge a thought that we're having. And the thinking, feeling doesn't stop. Human beings' thinking, feeling doesn't stop until they die. What we're practicing is non-attachment to the thinking, feeling. And even a strong thinking feeling appears, but what we're cultivating is not attaching to it, not following it. We don't judge it. We don't judge ourselves. We don't create this self that's guilty of having this thought feeling. We don't create this self in some other country that's having a thought feeling. We let go of this idea. We disrupt the narrative that there are people and this people are causing the suffering. We have a poem in my tradition. Good and evil have no self-nature. That's not saying there's no such thing as good and evil. It's saying good and evil, they're here, they happen, but they have no self-nature. The next line, holy and unholy are empty names. If we make something holy and we make something else unholy, we have divided the world up. And the world's not divided. The world is unfolding as a complete whole, with every part completely interpenetrating every other part. So if we dice it up into, oh, this is holy and this is unholy, then we have a problem. The poem goes next is, outside of the door is the land of stillness and light. So this is just referring to everyone's direct experience. And then the last line of the poem, spring comes, the grass grows by itself. So there's an incomprehensible component to this poem. The first 10 times I heard this poem, it just gave me a big question, because my idea of self was so wedded to everything else I thought and everything else I felt. But the more we practice, the more we follow our breath, the more we're mindful as we do the dishes, the more yoga nidra we practice and we feel the sensations of our bodies ebbing and flowing, then there starts to be some space. There's a spaciousness. Here's the heart feeling. Here's the heart thought, thinking, feeling. Here's the observer of it. So the observer hasn't disappeared, but there's some space in between. So a big stormy feeling can appear. We don't have to follow it. We see it, we feel it, we don't follow it. If we can keep our don't know, we start to trust our true nature, that which is not separated from this universe at all. Then we reside there. We take refuge there. Sure, our feelings come and go, but we're taking refuge from those storms, from those changes. Then, in our life, moment by moment, something needs to happen. We do the chores, we go to our jobs, we see our family, we celebrate Christmas, we go on a trip, we do everything. And we're in this world, participating with it. But rather than following thought feeling, we're just keeping a question. What is this? What is the truth I'm in? What is my relationship to it? And what is my correct function? So this word correct, some people get a little hung up on it. We don't have to attach to this idea of correct. Just our natural function appears. Avalokiteshvara, one translation of her name is the one who looks deeply. And in the Heart Sutra, that actually happens in the text. It says her name and then it says that while practicing deeply, while looking deeply. The other translation of her name, which came along about 500 years later, is the one who hears the cries of the world. And I'm suggesting we are both of those qualities as we go through this world. And we don't need to be frightened. of that capacity. That capacity shows us we can do this. And it's unknowable. It's incomprehensible. And then that's what we use to let go of my worldview, my opinion about Ukraine, my opinion about Russia, my opinion about Israel, my opinion about Hamas, etc., etc. If we're able to let go of that, even just briefly, our wisdom and compassion will flow, and it'll flow in both directions. And if we begin to look deeply into our heart-mind, we'll see, how can this suffering be measured? Suffering cannot be measured. We know that suffering is here, but we cannot measure, oh, this person's suffering is greater or less than this community's suffering, or this community's suffering is greater or less than this city's suffering. This city's suffering is greater or less than this country's suffering, etc., etc. That's understanding. That's trying to understand. That's what our minds want to do, and that's desire. That's thinking. That's ignorance. So our practice, whether our practice is mindfulness, finding the breath, residing in the body, whether our practice is don't know, whether our practice is Tonglen, whether our practice is extending loving kindness, all of those point to the same thing. We don't have to worry about the style of practice. All of our practices always bring us to the now. And it's only now that we can express loving kindness. It's only now we can embody the wisdom that we feel, that we can embody the compassion that we feel. And it's only now that we can take some action. And the now always cuts off the story, always cuts off the history, always cuts off this futile analysis of cause and effect, cause and effect. These things happen, that thing happened. It does take courage, but everyone naturally has that courage. It does take persistence. That we have to sometimes work up. But the payoff is immediately the end of our suffering, because our wisdom appears. And then immediately we see skillful means, and we can utilize the skillful means and take care of the suffering in our immediate family, then our neighborhood, our Dharma practicing brothers and sisters, like everybody on the screen, and on, where we work, where we live, like that. This is something we have to do over and over. It isn't something that is fixed. It's in a constant state of flux. So we have some insight. We see the spaciousness between our observation of thought feeling and the experience of thought feeling. They stick. Then we practice, they don't stick. Then they stick again. Then we practice, and they don't stick. Then they stick again. And even Zen masters, even the Buddha, they would stick to their emotions and their thought feelings. Then they would practice. They have to rely on the practice. That when we say take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, that's basically taking refuge in the practice. It's a practice-based teaching from the Buddha. So the Buddha didn't teach a theology about the beginning of the world. He didn't teach a theology about heaven, hell, all of that stuff. He didn't teach a theology about where things come from or where things go. He just taught a practice that causes the end of suffering and causes kindness to appear. And we as modern people are subjected to an extraordinary amount of consumption in the media. And For me personally, I've realized that when I was 16 and watching black and white news coverage of the Vietnam War, and both American soldiers being carried on stretchers all limp and dead or wounded, and Vietnamese villagers being on fire on the evening news. And now we have YouTube Shorts and TikTok with 2-minute videos of lifeless children being carried by their parents, or grandchildren and grandmothers dead or being freed. This is an extraordinary kind of sensorial intimacy with something we are tens of thousands of miles away from. If we consume too much of this, we will lose our trust in humanity, because we are being exposed to the suffering in kind of a processed way. So Thich Nhat Hanh, many teachers have always warned us about we become what we consume. And that doesn't just apply to food. When we keep good company with Dharma practitioners like we are today, we help each other. We kind of consume each other because we're practicing together. When we spend time with family and friends who care about us and we care about them, that's a consumption of our humanity. And that's a really valuable and important thing. And it restores our sense of what a human being is. Not just what a person is, but what a human being is. So we have to regulate how much we take in. Otherwise, our grief will overwhelm us, our compassion will overwhelm us, and it won't be balanced with wisdom. Now, one of the immediate ways to balance ourselves when our compassion is overwhelming us is breathing, noticing our breath, and then noticing the body. Oh, where's my body? Which chair am I sitting in? What temperature is the room I'm in? What's going on right now? We just return to now. We return to what's coming in the senses. We're not discarding what we're learning or what we just consumed. We're welcoming it all in. Not just the narrative, not just the story, not just the 2-minute YouTube short or the TikTok video of some heartbreaking, horrific, inhuman activity. That's the only way we can maintain our center of wisdom. In my tradition, we say our don't know center, or we say our primary point. That is our absolute nature. It's the part of us that was never born. It's the part of us that doesn't die. It's the part of us that is not separate from the sky or the trees, and not separate from the people suffering in these places. So how each of us does that is a don't know. And was one reason why I described the topic today in the form of questions. Avalokiteshvara lives as a symbol, but it's a symbol of what we are. But the way we all get there, how do we keep this all-sidedness? How do we keep this cool water of compassion that puts out the fires of conflict? By keeping a don't know, letting our hearts break, and letting them bleed gold. That's the wisdom and compassion. And inevitably they break again. And then they bleed gold again. Our willingness to let our hearts break, whether it's for the environment, whether it's for international conflict, whether it's for familial conflict, whether it's for religious conflict, it doesn't matter. We can let our heart break and open ourselves to an all-sided compassion for these polarized points. It can transform us, but it takes effort. And I also always say, start with the small stuff and watch how it happens with a small issue. Then move to something larger, something closer to home. Then watch how it happens with something larger, something closer to home. And it's an endless practice. It isn't something we achieve. Like the Heart Sutra said, there's no attainment and nothing to attain. We already have this capacity. And as the Heart Sutra says, the mind is no hindrance. So that's a very important point. The narrative I carry in my head, oh, my friend who was born in a kibbutz and is now my best friend, who lived in Israel half his life. Yes, that narrative is there. Yes, that is my best friend. But that mind is no hindrance to my compassion if I look deeply. And then my speech and action towards my friend will always be correct. And if my friend is suffering, I'll know what to say. I'll know what to do. As long as I'm paying attention and listening deeply. And not trying to analyze, not trying to understand. Understanding cannot help us. The mind is no hindrance, no ignorance, and no extinction of it. So there's no extinction of the ignorance in the world. That's not coming. Our path doesn't matter. Our path is to look so deeply into ourselves and thereby into all human beings. We realize, oh, they are human beings and they are capable of this kind of action. And I could be capable of this kind of action under certain circumstances. And this I that I'm referring to is empty of any self-nature. So I can let that go. Now only, how can I help? It just simply returns to that.